So most bets are currently predicting that come Friday, the 5th of July, we're going to have a Labour government. One thing that Labour Party are focusing on is, as they describe, increasing and improving the relationship between employers and trade unions. What is this going to mean for us? Well, just currently, just to clarify, there are already obviously some legal entitlements around trade unions. There are situations where you do have to consult with trade unions currently. So, for example, large-scale redundancies, TUPE transfer situations, you have to consult with employee reps. So they can be either your own elected reps or trade union representatives. And then also in individual situations, so where an employee is going through a formal process. So, for example, a disciplinary hearing or a grievance hearing, then again they have the statutory right to be accompanied by someone, and they can choose for that person to be a trade union representative. But there are specific requirements around collective agreements. So that's where you as an employer have a formal arrangement with a union that you will discuss and negotiate with them on certain terms and conditions of employment. For example, pay, hours of work, holiday entitlement. But there are some quite clear processes around how an employer might have to acquire a trade union recognition. That only applies currently to employers that have at least 21 members of staff, where at least 10% of those of your employees are trade union members of a specific trade union, and where at least 50% of your staff say from the outset that they want to be under a collective agreement. So in that situation, it's called statutory recognition. So if all of those hurdles are met, you as a business are then required to have a collective agreement with them and negotiate with your trade union on those key terms and conditions of employment. So the Labour Party, in their manifesto, they talk about their New Deal for working people, and they make it very clear that within the first 100 days of a Labour government, they are going to change the law that, in their words, improves the partnership between employers and trade unions. And they make it very clear that they think the collective voice of workers is key in that, in a negotiating relationship between businesses and trade unions. But to be honest, they don't go into a huge amount of detail in terms of how they're going to do that. However, just before they launched their manifesto, their website did include a lot more detailed information, which they've now removed from the website. And that information followed a meeting that the main leaders of the Labour Party had, a crunch meeting with the leaders of the main trade unions in Britain. And I think it's fair to say that they went into a lot of detail and gave a lot of assurances to the trade unions after that meeting in terms of the specific things they were going to do. So if we just run through what the things they asked, or they did say that they were going to do, and as I say, this did go into a lot of very specific information. And there's quite a list of things that they said, specific things they said they were going to do about trade unions. A lot of them quite concerning, I would say, particularly to small businesses. So first of all, there were some elements of the current law that they said they were going to repeal. So around the rules around businesses utilising agency workers to break strikes. The minimum service level legislation as well, which actually is very common across, I think, most of Europe, where within the public sector, key service levels have to be provided, and a strike can't prevent those key measures. So, they said prior to the manifesto that those two things they were going to completely repeal. They also talked about simplifying the process of union recognition. And changing that requirement of at least 50% of staff wishing to go forward with a recognition, so making it much simpler for a union to acquire a recognition agreement. They also talked about giving union reps a specific statutory entitlement to access the workplace in all workplaces, not just where there's a union recognition agreement, but in all workplaces. So it's a statutory requirement for an open door to allow union reps into your business to speak with your staff. They also talked about a legal requirement for all employers, again, irrespective of whether they've got a current agreement with a union or not, but a legal requirement that all employers notify all of their staff, both new staff and existing staff, of their statutory entitlement to be represented by trade unions. So not only giving the trade union reps access, but also requiring employers to actively notify their staff of the trade union representatives and opportunities. Um, they also talked about giving trade union representatives more detailed prescriptive entitlements within the workplace. And a completely new area that they talked about, and that's introducing statutory rights for trade union equality representatives as well. So not just the general representatives in the workplace, but a statutory right for very specific trade union reps around the area of equality. So quite significant additional trade union entitlements there. Very specific, and no criteria given in terms of, only for large employers. No specific said that would be any different for a small business than with a very large business. So if that all comes through, and I think we'll know pretty quickly, because as they do say in their manifesto, they're intending rushing through in their first 100 days legislation around this. So we won't have long to find out whether all of that information that they previously talked about is actually going to come to fruition. But if it does, clearly a lot more requirements for businesses to be aware of and then to facilitate. So we wait to see. We in Fair Job UK will keep a close eye on this, and of course we'll be here to advise and support you when the law changes on any of these things, because certainly around trade union activity, it sounds like it's going to be very detailed, very prescriptive, and quite onerous on businesses. So we will be there to help and support you along the way.